Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're doing something a bit different. We're zeroing in on one person, someone who's built just immense financial and cultural influence, but somehow has managed to stay almost completely invisible to the public.
Yeah, it's fascinating. If you really want to track where power sits in today's economy, sometimes, well, you have to look for the person who isn't making headlines. It's a real study in paradox, isn't it? The sheer scale of the influence is just staggering, yet his public profile, it's like practically non-existent.
Exactly. We're talking about Mark Walter. He's the co-founder and CEO of Guggenheim Partners.
And the backstory is just incredible.
That's the first hook, right? Walter was born in 1960, son of a concrete factory worker. Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I mean, not exactly your typical launch pad for a financial titan.
No, not at all.
Yet today, Guggenheim Partners, the firm he leads, oversees something like, what is it, $345 billion in assets.
That's the number, yeah. Around $345 billion as of 2025 estimates.
And just to give you some perspective on that number, that level of financial control, that's more than the entire GDP of quite a few countries.
It's massive. And what's really, truly fascinating is mapping that journey from Iowa to commanding that kind of capital. And crucially, how he managed to completely sidestep the sort of celebrity status that seems almost mandatory for other billionaires these days.
Right. We know Bezos, Musk, Gates. Oh, you can name the CEOs of almost every major tech and finance player.
Yeah.
But Walter, he kind of remains the ghost in the machine.
Precisely.
So that's really our mission today for you, the listener, to try and understand the source of that unique power. We want to dive into Walter's, let's say, different definition of wealth, how his very quiet approach actually became a competitive weapon, and his really strategic method for investing not just in companies, but in what the sources call cultural gravity.
Yeah, it's a unique playbook.
Okay, let's start right there with the foundational philosophy. We know Walter controls billions, directs hundreds of billions, but how does he actually define money differently than, say, your typical Wall Street investor?
Well, I think his upbringing is really key here. You mentioned Cedar Rapids, the factory worker father. Growing up without that assumed financial security, it seems to have really informed his view. For him, money it's not a trophy, right? It's not about keeping score. And it's definitely not meant for flashy, ostentatious luxury.
Okay.
Money, in his framework, seems to be seen purely as a tool, a lever, something you use to purchase influence, to control opportunities, and maybe most importantly, to create long-term stability.
So it's less about possession and more about deployment. Like capital is active machinery meant to be put to work.
That's a great way to put it, active machinery. And this brings us to what some analysts call his wealth as influence model.
Explain that a bit more.
Yeah, so the idea is that true wealth, real power, isn't measured by how big your personal bank account is. It's measured by your ability to direct these huge, stable pools of capital. And that's where you see the paradox almost physically. While his personal net worth is, definitely substantial, estimated somewhere between, say, $6 and maybe $12 billion, that number is, frankly, kind of modest compared to the $345 billion in assets he commands through Guggenheim.
Okay, so the influence comes from directing the larger pool, not just owning a slice of it. But how does that actually work? How do you command that much capital without personally owning all of it? This gets into the structure of Guggenheim Partners itself, doesn't it?
It's everything. It really is. Guggenheim isn't structured like your typical bank or a hedge fund that's constantly chasing quarterly returns. Its foundation, its bedrock, is deeply rooted in managing insurance assets.
Insurance assets, like life insurance.
Exactly. Think about it. When you pay your premium for a life insurance policy, that money goes into a massive pool. And that pool is incredibly stable. It's predictable. It's what they call long-dated capital.
Meaning the payouts are far off in the future.
Precisely. So it isn't prone to sudden panic withdrawals like bank deposits or the kind of short-term volatility that plagues typical investment funds. People don't suddenly cash out their life insurance en masse because the stock market dips.
Okay, I see. So instead of needing to generate a huge return every 6 months or every year, he has access to these vast pools of cash that are basically guaranteed to stick around for decades.
That's the core of it. That long-term stable liability base, as it's called, is the foundation of his power. It lets him engage in these incredibly long-game investments, things like buying sports teams, right, where the real payoff might not fully materialize for 10, 15, even 20 years.
Because he doesn't need the money back next quarter.
Exactly. He controls predictable, patient capital. Yeah. And that control is the real source of influence. It far outweighs his personal fortune, significant as it is.
Okay, let's pivot then. Let's talk about his career strategy. He gets this law degree, Northwestern, 1985, but then pivots pretty quickly into finance. How do you build an empire on this scale and do it so quietly, especially in such a high-octane, high-visibility industry?
Well, it seems like it was done with very calculated steps, always prioritizing the structure, the foundation, over any kind of personal spotlight. He laid some groundwork with a firm called Liberty Hampshire Company back in 1996, but the real key was establishing Guggenheim Partners in 1999. That seemed to be the culmination of his vision, building financial structures specifically designed to outlast market cycles.
So durability over flashiness.
Completely. He just wasn't interested in being a media darling or the face on the magazine cover. He was focused on building something that would endure.
And this leads us right into what we're calling the silent billionaire habit. I mean, we live in this age of constant performance, right? Social media, endless press tours, keynote speeches everywhere. Walter seems to actively shun all of that.
Yeah, and it's critical to understand his silence isn't just a personality quirk. It seems to be a highly effective, very strategic competitive advantage. He almost never grants interviews. You won't see him popping up on CNBC. He avoids the big splashy conferences like Davos. He essentially lets the movement of that $345 billion do the talking for him.
But why is that powerful? We tend to think visibility equals power, especially now.
Well, think about the attention economy we live in. Noise is cheap, right? Constant commentary, endless speculation. Discretion, on the other hand, particularly at that scale, signals something else. It signals calculated power. So when Walter makes a big move, like, say, acquiring a major cultural icon, it lands without all the preceding hype. There's no drip feed of rumors, no speculative tweets that usually surround these massive deals.
So competitors are caught off guard.
Exactly. They're left scrambling to figure out his intent, his strategy. It forces everyone to interpret his actions rather than just react to his commentary or his predictions. His invisibility, paradoxically, makes his actions seem more potent, more deliberate.
It really is the ultimate contrast to the modern CEO playbook. He's demonstrating you can be incredibly powerful without being constantly present on everyone's feed.
It's a tough discipline to maintain, no doubt, especially in an industry that often seems to demand constant networking and self-promotion.
Yeah.
But it also shields him, doesn't it? It shields him from a lot of the day-to-day public scrutiny until a deal is basically done. While his peers might be, testifying before Congress or dealing with a PR crisis over some badly worded tweet, Walter's quietly focused on deploying those vast capital reserves. He benefits from the fact that most people, frankly, have probably forgotten his name, if they ever knew it.
Okay, this is where the strategy gets really tangible, I think.
Yeah.
Walter doesn't just buy financial firms or standard assets. He acquires cultural assets. Let's talk about this idea, the cultural assets over financial assets principle. What does that actually mean in practice?
It means looking beyond the immediate balance sheet, beyond the next quarter's earnings. It means recognizing that certain assets carry immense value because of their cultural gravity.
Cultural gravity, like their influence.
Yeah, their ability to shape the public narrative over the long haul, to build these deeply entrenched brands that generate real emotional loyalty. He's essentially purchasing real-world influence that can compound for decades. It's a different kind of value.
And the prime example here, the one everyone points to, has to be the Dodgers acquisition back in 2012.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That $2.15 billion price tag. It shocked everyone at the time. Critics were lining up to call it the very definition of reckless overspending, a vanity project.
Yeah, I remember that.
But remember the capital base we talked about? That's stable insurance money. He wasn't using high-risk hedge fund capital that needed a quick 5-year flip. He structured the purchase using that patient long-term capital derived from Guggenheim's insurance assets.
Which allowed him to think much further ahead.
Precisely. It allowed him to make a long-term cultural bet. He was betting on the future, the exploding value of regional sports networks, live broadcast rights, the whole media ecosystem around a team like the Dodgers over the next 2 decades.
So the stability of the funding source enabled the long-term cultural vision.
Exactly. The stable capital allowed him to absorb any short-term bumps, any market fluctuations, and just patiently wait for the cultural resonance of that iconic Dodgers brand to translate into massive exponential media revenue streams. So it wasn't really a reckless gamble. It was a calculated investment in cultural dominance, backstopped by a financial structure built specifically for endurance.
And that long-term vision, it goes beyond just Major League Baseball, right? We also see him making significant investments in women's sports. Things like the WNBA's Los Angeles Sparks, And more recently, the Professional Women's Hockey League.
Yes, and this is a perfect illustration of that principle. Looking where others maybe refuse to look or just don't see the long-term value yet. Most traditional investors, maybe viewing women's sports through a purely short-term financial lens, might have dismissed them as unprofitable or niche just a few years ago.
Yeah, that was the common wisdom.
But Walter seems to have been anticipating the inevitable cultural momentum, the growing conversation around equity, representation, diversity. He recognized or bet that those powerful social conversations would eventually drive up viewership, attract major sponsorships, and crucially, increase the valuations of these leagues and teams.
So investing ahead of the curve, betting on cultural shifts.
Right. He invests early in these undercurrents, seemingly knowing that these cultural shifts often become massive economic tidal waves down the line.
Okay, this all sounds brilliant, especially in hindsight. But let's bring in a little critical perspective here. This whole long game mindset, this reliance on what you call anticipatory resilience, it inherently carries huge risks, doesn't it? What if the cultural asset tanks? What if he misjudges that long-term trend? Does his strategy rely on just being right almost every single time, or is there some kind of buffer built in?
That's a really crucial question. And the buffer seems to be twofold. First, going back to that capital pool, its stability means he doesn't face things like forced selling in a downturn or margin calls if an investment takes longer to mature. He can genuinely afford to wait out the cycles.
Okay, the patient capital again.
Right. And second, by linking diverse assets, a major sports team in LA, a financial investment vehicle like Guggenheim, the risk is distributed. It's not all riding on one horse. The financial structure can insulate the cultural asset to some extent, and over time, the cultural asset ideally generates reliable, long-term cash flow to feed back into the structure.
That structural insulation sounds key, and we're seeing the strategy evolve even further now, aren't we, with his latest venture, TWG Global. He co-founded that in 2024 with Thomas Tull. And this firm seems explicitly designed to bridge AI, sports, entertainment, and finance.
Yes, TWG Global really feels like the capstone on this entire model we've been discussing. It's built on the recognition that, going forward, finance and technology simply cannot exist in isolation from culture. They're increasingly intertwined. So Walter seems to be deliberately engineering what we might call an influence multiplication loop.
Okay, influence multiplication loop. Let's pull that apart. How does linking, say, artificial intelligence and the WNBA actually multiply influence? That sounds like an odd pairing on the surface.
Well, think about it in terms of fan engagement, data monetization, operational efficiency. Cultural assets like sports teams, they generate enormous amounts of incredibly valuable real-time data. Plus, they have these deeply engaged, passionate audiences.
Right.
So by investing heavily in AI through TWG, Walter can apply cutting-edge technology to optimize almost everything, from stadium operations and predictive sports analytics for player performance to creating highly personalized fan experiences and even optimizing global media distribution strategies.
Ah, okay. So the AI makes the cultural asset run better, maybe become more profitable, more engaging.
Exactly. And conversely, the cultural asset, the sports team, the league, provides the perfect, high-visibility, real-world testing ground for the AI to demonstrate its capabilities. It generates the data the AI needs to learn and improve.
So it's a feedback loop. The AI enhances the value of the cultural asset, and the cultural asset provides the platform and the data for the AI.
Precisely. The success of the AI investments reinforces the value and reach of the sports franchises. And the potentially stable, growing cash flow from those franchises provides the massive patient capital needed for really ambitious, long-horizon AI research and development.
So he's literally positioning himself at the crossroads.
He is. He's sitting right at the intersection of culture, technology, and finance. And the structure ensures that success in one dimension almost immediately reinforces the value and potential in the others. The core philosophy seems crystal clear. The future belongs to those who can effectively control and integrate these converging platforms. So that maybe synthesize this whole deep dive for you, the listener. Mark Walter's story, I think, fundamentally challenges how we often view wealth and power. It suggests it's not primarily about personal accumulation or, luxury living. It's about having the enduring structural control, that patient capital, to place these huge long-term strategic bets that anticipate where culture is heading. His journey from Cedar Rapids to becoming this, global commander of capital is really a testament to the idea that patience, discretion, and a focus on structure are, maybe counterintuitively, profoundly potent forms of power in our noisy modern world.
It really does flip the script on so much conventional wisdom about success and influence today. Okay, let's quickly review the key takeaways we've kind of pulled together from these sources. Ideas that maybe apply no matter what scale of ambition you're working with. First, there's that wealth as influence model. Remember, money seen as a mechanism, a lever to control opportunity, not just a trophy to polish. The real power resides in the ability to direct capital effectively, not necessarily in personally owning every last dollar.
Yeah, that's fundamental. Second, the silent billionaire habit. It really teaches us that discretion, building quietly, can be a powerful competitive advantage. In a world that seems to reward constant noise, building your structures in silence can actually allow your actions, when you finally make them, to carry far greater weight and impact.
Third, that focus on strategic cultural assets. Thinking about where long-term value really lies. It's often tied to cultural gravity, to things that resonate deeply with people over time. So maybe the lesson is, invest in things that will still matter a decade from now, and be willing to look closely at assets others might dismiss as niche or undervalued today.
Absolutely. And finally, his entire strategy seems to rest on this idea of anticipatory resilience. Don't just react to today's headlines or the short-term market jitters. Try to position yourself, your projects, your investments for the cultural and technological shifts you see coming down the road, maybe 5, 10 years out. That stability, ideally built on reliable structures like patient capital, is your foundation for playing that long game.
So we'll leave you with this provocative thought to mull over. In this age we live in, obsessed with constant visibility, instant results, immediate gratification, what structures are you building today? What foundations are you laying that grant you the endurance, the stability, and the patience required to truly play the long game? And perhaps more pointedly, are you willing to do that crucial building work in silence?